Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the courtesy. And I want to begin in the same place that Luis, who just spoke, started. I want to thank the entire committee for your thoughtful consideration of this bill. I'm here today to speak in strong support of House Bill 7982. This legislation will continue to protect Rhode Island's DACA recipients, the young members of our community, as we just heard, who have done nothing wrong, have done everything right, and are Americans in every single way except on paper. This legislation would simply continue the status quo, grant licenses and limited work authorization for folks who are recipients of DACA. Since this implementation, as we know, there have been 800,000 young people throughout the country and 1,200 here in Rhode Island who have been recipients of DACA protection. And in an effort to add a little bit that hasn't already been spoken, I am not a dreamer. I, however, have family members who have. My very own sister was born in Guatemala and was brought here at 1 year old. Their testimony and their words speak far deeper on the issue than I ever could. But there are a couple of things that I'd like to share. The first one is, oftentimes when we talk about immigration and perhaps privileges that we give at the local level, we talk about what kind of impact this would have. I've been mayor for 3 years now, and one thing that I've learned is that every single decision you make has consequences. And so what incentive or what kind of actions are we incentivizing if you were to pass this bill? As Representative Corvese mentioned, there's a special status created here. It's a class that can't grow anymore. It's folks that were brought here long ago, and anyone who's thinking of coming to the United States to avail themselves of DACA protection is foreclosed. Right? That door is absolutely closed. So this isn't a matter of encouraging more immigration to the state, regardless of how you feel about that issue. It's about this closed class of 1,200 young people in our state who have done everything right, have done nothing wrong. They've submitted background checks, they've been paying taxes, they hold mortgages, they have expenses just like all of us, and all they're asking for is the ability to drive and to work. The second thing that I'd like to underscore is, this is indeed something that's never been tried or hasn't been tried yet in the United States. I believe that the driver's license issue, it's a pretty straightforward one. I agree that it's a state issue. On the temporary work permit, there might be open legal questions, but if the sponsors and this committee are open to amendments, then there's no legal issue that we can't overcome and address by dialogue and compromise. And so I think everyone is very much open to that. But a bill like this positions the state of Rhode Island to be a leader on what we can all agree affects a class that deserves all of our sympathies. These are kids who, again, have done absolutely nothing wrong. And if what the state of Rhode Island does is pass this protection to our young people, and it gets debated in court, regardless, we know that as a state, we stood up for something that matters and for people who needed the help. 70% in recent surveys of Americans, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, have shown that they support some protection for dreamers. That's incredible, 70%. So there's something special about these kids. I'll leave it up to them to tell their story in much more powerful ways than I ever could. But certainly, as the mayor of a city who would be deeply impacted by something like this, I would want to be able to have all of our kids throughout the city believe that if they work hard, they have access to the American dream, just like the ideals that we profess to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions? Yes, Representative Coughlin.
Mayor, if you know, who grants work permits? Is that the federal government or the state government?
Say that again, sorry?
Work permits, are they granted by the state government or the federal government?
From what I understand, it's by the federal government.
Thank you, that's what I understand. Thank you, Mayor.
Are there any other questions for Mayor Alyssa? Yes, Representative Flippy?
As to the work permit, I want to unpack it a little bit. We would make it legal under state law for someone who comes under our bill to work. Whether they have federal issues is really a question for the federal government. Is that analysis correct, would you say?
I believe so, right? And these are folks who they've filled out an application, they've given their name, their address, they've gone through a background check, they've committed no felonies, no significant misdemeanors. Now, these are people who have already been granted that work permit. And all this does is continue what has already been granted at the federal level. And, I am in the same position that I think a lot of folks in this room. Are we 100% that if the Supreme Court of the United States heard this case, they would find this way? I don't think anyone can say that they're 100% about anything nowadays. So if there's a question, there's a question. But think about, what if we are wrong on this? What if it turns out that it is declared at some point down the road to be unconstitutional? We did it standing up for kids who represent what's best about our country. Because when we say dreamers, dreamers just isn't just a title. Dreamers it's an action statement, right? It speaks to who we are as a country and what we believe in. These kids have done everything right, and we believe that they deserve a chance at the American dream, just like everyone else.
I think it's a risk worth taking.
Anything further?